Black waitress accidentally drops drink on billionaire. He yells, "Clean it up with your tongue." What if a simple accident changed the life of a waitress forever? What if one humiliating moment, when a billionaire mocked her for spilling wine on him, became the catalyst for her rise from the shadows? Sophia Johnson moved through the dining room of Lucille, one of New York City's most exclusive restaurants, with the grace of someone who had mastered the art of invisibility. At 28, she was a striking woman, tall, with warm brown skin and eyes that held a quiet fire. Her tightly coiled curls were pulled back into a neat bun, and her black uniform was pressed to perfection, a stark contrast to the glittering wealth around her. The patrons, draped in designer suits and gowns, barely noticed her as she refilled wine glasses and cleared plates. To them, she was just another server, a shadow in the background of their opulent lives. But Sophia was more than that. By day, she navigated the chaos of Lucille, balancing trays and egos with equal precision. By night, she pored over textbooks, working toward her degree in social work at a community college in Brooklyn. Her dream wasn't just to escape the grind of waitressing, it was to build something bigger, something that could lift up people like her, people the world often overlooked. She wanted to open a nonprofit to empower low-income communities, to give them the tools to rise above the systems that kept them down. It was a dream born from her own life, from growing up in a cramped apartment in the South Bronx, where her mother, Clarissa, had worked herself to the bone to give Sophia a shot at something better. Clarissa's words were Sophia's anchor. "The world will try to make you small, Sophia. Don't let them." Those words had carried her through years of struggle, through the taunts of kids in her neighborhood who called her too smart for her own good, through the teachers who underestimated her, through the countless times she'd been made to feel less than because of her skin or her circumstances. Tonight, though, as she wove through the dining room, those words felt distant, drowned out by the clatter of dishes and the weight of exhaustion. It was a busy night, the kind where the air buzzed with the energy of power and privilege. Lucille's clientele included CEOs, politicians, and tech moguls, people who tossed around money and influence like confetti. Sophia had learned to keep her head down, to smile politely, to let their casual arrogance roll off her back. But tonight, something felt off. Maybe it was the way her feet ached after a double shift, or the fact that she'd stayed up until 3 a.m. studying for an exam. Whatever it was, her hands weren't as steady as usual. She approached table 12, where a group of men in tailored suits sat, their laughter loud and careless. At the head of the table was Gordon Holt, a tech billionaire whose name was synonymous with wealth and ruthlessness. His company, Holt Enterprises, had made headlines for its cutthroat business practices and his own larger-than-life persona. He was in his early 50s, with sharp features, slicked-back silver hair, and eyes that seemed to size up everyone in the room as either useful or irrelevant. Sophia had served him before, and she knew his type. Men who saw people like her as props, not people. She reached for his glass to pour more wine, but her tray wobbled. In a split second, the glass tipped, and a stream of red wine splashed across Gordon's pristine white shirt. The room seemed to freeze. Sophia's heart plummeted. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. She grabbed a napkin from her tray, ready to blot the stain, but Gordon was already on his feet, his face twisted with rage. "You incompetent fool," he roared, his voice carrying across the dining room. Every head turned. "Do you have any idea how much this shirt costs? More than you make in a month, I bet." Sophia's cheeks burned, but she kept her composure. "I'm so sorry, sir. Let me get you some club soda." "Club soda?" Gordon sneered, stepping closer, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think club soda fixes this? Clean it up with your tongue." The words hit like a slap. The dining room, already quiet, seemed to suck in its breath. Sophia's hands froze on the napkin, her mind racing. She could feel every eye on her, the weight of their judgment pressing down. The other servers, her manager, the patrons, they were all watching, waiting for her to react. To crumble. To prove she was as small as Gordon Holt thought she was. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "Don't let them." But in that moment, with Gordon's cruel words hanging in the air, she felt small. Invisible. Disposable. She wanted to scream, to throw the napkin in his face, to tell him exactly what she thought of him and his overpriced shirt. But she couldn't. Not here, not now. Not when her job, her tuition, her dreams were all on the line. "I'm sorry," she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. She knelt to wipe the wine from the floor, her hands trembling. The room slowly came back to life, murmurs and clinking glasses resuming, but Sophia could still feel the weight of their stares. Gordon sat back down, smirking, already dismissing her as he turned back to his companions. As she cleaned, Sophia's mind churned. She thought of her mother, who had scrubbed floors and toilets to keep their family afloat. She thought of the nights she'd spent studying by a flickering kitchen light, promising herself she'd make it out. She thought of all the times she'd swallowed her pride, bitten her tongue, let the world treat her like she was nothing. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. She wasn't going to let this be the end of her story. Sophia finished her shift in a daze, her body moving on autopilot while her mind burned with anger and resolve. In the break room, she sat alone, staring at her hands, still stained faintly with red wine. Her coworker, Jamal, a line cook who'd been at Lucille for years, noticed her silence. "You okay, Soph?" he asked, leaning against the counter. That guy was a real piece of work. Sophia forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just another day, right?" But she wasn't fine. Gordon's words kept replaying in her head, each one a dagger. "Clean it up with your tongue." It wasn't just the humiliation, it was the way he'd looked at her, like she was less than human. Like her existence was an inconvenience to his perfect world. She'd dealt with microaggressions before, with customers who assumed she was uneducated or sneered when she didn't jump fast enough. But this was different. This was blatant, raw, and personal. When she got home to her small apartment in Brooklyn, she dropped her bag and sank onto the couch. The walls were thin, and she could hear her neighbors arguing, the sound of a TV blaring. She closed her eyes and let her mother's words wash over her again. "The world will try to make you small." Clarissa had faced her own battles, racism, poverty, exhaustion, but she'd never let them define her. She'd taught Sophia to hold her head high, to fight for her place in a world that didn't always want her. Sophia pulled out her laptop and opened a document she'd been working on for months, a proposal for her non-profit, the Rising Voice Project. It was her dream, her way of giving back to the communities that had raised her, the ones that were too often ignored. The plan was ambitious: job training programs, educational workshops, advocacy for affordable housing, but she believed in it. She'd been saving every penny, attending night classes, and networking with local activists to make it a reality. But tonight, staring at the document, she felt a surge of doubt. Could she really do this? Was she fooling herself, thinking she could take on a world that saw her as nothing more than a waitress? Then she remembered Gordon's sneer, his dismissal of her place. And something inside her snapped. She wasn't just going to survive this, she was going to rise above it. She wasn't going to let men like Gordon Holt define her worth. She closed her laptop, her resolve hardening. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been made to feel small, every person who'd been told they didn't belong. Over the next few months, Sophia threw herself into her work, both at Lucille and on her nonprofit. She took on extra shifts to save money, stayed up late refining her proposal, and reached out to community leaders for support. She attended networking events, her confidence growing with each connection she made. Slowly but surely, the Rising Voice Project began to take shape. She secured a small grant from a local foundation, rented a modest office space in the Bronx, and started building a team of volunteers who shared her vision. Her first program was a job training workshop for young Black women, teaching them skills like resume writing, interview techniques, and financial literacy. Sophia poured her heart into it, drawing on her own experiences to inspire her students. She told them about her mother, about the nights she'd spent studying, about the customers who'd tried to break her spirit. And she told them about Gordon Holt, not by name, but as a symbol of the obstacles they'd all face. "The world will try to make you small," she'd say, echoing her mother. "But you are bigger than that. You are unstoppable." The program was a success, and word began to spread. A local newspaper ran a story about the Rising Voice Project, calling Sophia a rising star in social justice. The article caught the attention of a major philanthropist, who offered to fund an expansion of her programs. Soon, Sophia was speaking at community events, her voice growing stronger with each appearance. She wasn't just a waitress anymore, she was a leader, a force to be reckoned with. Meanwhile, Gordon Holt was living his life as usual, closing multi-million-dollar deals and basking in his own importance. He'd forgotten about the incident at Lucille, dismissed it as a minor annoyance. But one morning, as he sipped his coffee and scrolled through the news on his tablet, he stopped cold. There, on the homepage of a major news site, was a headline, "From Waitress to Warrior, How Sophia Johnson is Changing Lives." Below it was a photo of Sophia, standing in front of a group of young women, her smile radiant and her eyes fierce. Gordon read the article, his jaw tightening. It detailed Sophia's journey, her childhood in the South Bronx, her mother's sacrifices, her night classes, and her nonprofit's mission to empower marginalized communities. It mentioned the incident at Lucille, though not by name, describing how a humiliating encounter with a powerful figure had fueled her determination. Gordon felt a pang of unease. He'd never considered the impact of his words, never thought about the person on the receiving end. To him, Sophia had been a nobody. Now, she was somebody, a threat to the worldview he'd built around his own superiority. 6 months later, Sophia stood in a sleek black dress at a charity gala in Manhattan, her heart pounding with a mix of nerves and pride. The Rising Voice Project was being honored with an award for its impact on the community, and Sophia had been invited to speak. The room was filled with the city's elite, philanthropists, politicians, and business leaders, but Sophia no longer felt out of place. She'd earned her spot here, not by serving drinks, but by building something real. As she mingled with the guests, she caught sight of a familiar face across the room, Gordon Holt. He was standing with a group of men, his posture as commanding as ever, but there was something different about him tonight, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Sophia's stomach tightened, but she refused to look away. She wasn't the same woman he'd humiliated all those months ago. After her speech, which brought the room to its feet, Gordon approached her. The crowd parted, sensing the tension. He cleared his throat, his usual arrogance tempered by something else. Guilt, perhaps, or shame. "Miss Johnson," he said, his voice low. "I owe you an apology. What I said that night, it was wrong. I was wrong." Sophia studied him, her expression calm but unyielding. She could see the discomfort in his eyes, the way he shifted under her gaze. Part of her wanted to lash out, to tell him how his words had cut her, how they'd fueled her fire. But she didn't. She'd learned something over the past months. True power wasn't in revenge. It was in rising above. "You didn't break me, Gordon," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I've spent my whole life fighting to be seen. And now, not only do I see myself, but I'm helping others do the same." The room was silent, every guest hanging on her words. Gordon's face flushed, and for the first time, he had nothing to say. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, and walked away, the weight of her words lingering in the air. But Sophia's story didn't end with that moment of triumph. In the weeks that followed, she did something unexpected. She reached out to Gordon. Not to gloat, but to offer him a chance to learn. She invited him to visit the Rising Voice Project, to see the work she was doing, to meet the people he'd dismissed as lesser. To her surprise, he accepted. Gordon arrived at the nonprofit's office in the Bronx, looking out of place in his tailored suit. Sophia gave him a tour, introducing him to the young women in her job training program, the volunteers who'd dedicated their lives to the cause, the community members who were rebuilding their lives. She didn't lecture him or shame him, she simply let him see. And something in Gordon began to shift. He saw the strength in these people, the resilience, the humanity he'd ignored for so long. Over time, Gordon became an unlikely ally. He didn't tee a substantial donation to the Rising Voice Project, but more than that, he started listening. He attended workshops, asked questions, and began to confront the privilege that had blinded him for so long. Sophia didn't just change her own life, she changed his, and in doing so, she sparked a ripple effect. Other business leaders, inspired by her story, began supporting her work, amplifying her mission. Sophia stood on the stage at another gala a year later, her nonprofit now a national model for social justice. The Rising Voice Project had grown, with programs in multiple cities, and Sophia had become a respected voice in the fight for equality. Gordon was there, not as a guest of honor, but as a supporter, sitting quietly in the audience, his perspective forever changed. The story of the waitress who spilled wine on a billionaire and rose to greatness spread like wildfire. People across the country shared her story, inspired by her courage, her grace, and her refusal to be made small. Sophia's journey wasn't just about her, it was about every person who'd ever been told they weren't enough. And as she looked out at the crowd, she knew this was only the beginning. Her mother's words echoed in her heart. Don't let them. She hadn't. And now, she was helping others do the same.